have them put on there what phase it is. You know, so many of these things we purchase in multiple phases. You know, 3, 4, 5 phases, something like that. And I like to just mention, remind us that this is phase 5 or something like that. So.
Okay, sounds good.
That's a very good comment. I have worked with Joe Zangetti with the COA building and stuff, and he was so helpful in so many ways. And he gave us a little bit of the history, which, that was like 5 years ago. And you kind of forget when you moved in that when they moved into the police department, moved into the COA, that they didn't fully equip it with brand new things. They transferred things from the old station to there. So it was nice that he was able to put that all on one concise page, the history and the need and going forward. So from what I had contact with him previously to now, that seems to be his forte. He's really great at pulling everything together and keeping it, you're not gonna like this, but stupid simple.
Yeah.
So that you know what the history is and you know what their needs are. And he's very good at explaining in person or on paper. So I felt it was necessary to acknowledge, because everybody's quick to find faults, and when somebody does a good job, they should be acknowledged.
Right.
Yep.
No, that was a good point, because it was exactly how I felt. And actually, by the time we get through reading his presentation, there were almost no questions to ask. Everything was right there.
Exactly. So I think we have everybody here.
Yep. Okay, being asked, we ready, Patrick?
We are ready. Actually, the only person I think we're missing here is the Board of Assessors, but we can come back to them. But yeah, it looks like we got all members of the Capital Budget Committee. Just going to call the meeting to order, and local media just said they're ready to go when you are.
Okay. The hour being after 7 p.m., we'd like to bring this
6.
meeting to order. 6 p.m. I'm sorry. I'm looking right at the clock here. I'm saying 7. So. Okay.
Jet lag.
Right. So I guess what did I do my ticket now? So,
If you want, I can kind of tee things up, Ed, if you want, for the night.
I'm sorry, say again.
Yeah, you want me to just kind of tee things up for tonight?
Yes, please.
So earlier today, I sent over to the committee a revised capital budget packet. In the email, what I explained was on Monday night, the Board of Sewer and Water Commissioners met to review their capital budget proposals and decided they wanted to reprioritize some of their funding. So in the email, so let me just pull that up real quick. In the email that I sent, they're looking to reduce the request for the supplemental water source investigation from $875,000 to $375,000. And then on their 5-year plan, they had an item there for the Mine Brook well improvements for $350,000. They just wanted to bring that up, to this year's capital budget. And also, this impacts the discussion for tonight. The Recreation Department, they had a request for design services for Center and South Pool. This is a result of, if you may recall, last fall, the Rec Department submitted a request for $50,000 for a feasibility study and facility study of all their facilities. So included Blackburn Hall, East Walpole Library, the pools, Jarvis Farm. I think that might be it. So actually that report just finished yesterday. There was a presentation that was given to the select board last night. So in that presentation, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it. I know I only sent that maybe 4 or 5 hours ago. There was a link in that email with the with that feasibility study and report from Weston and Sampson that we've since put on our website, on the town administrator's website. So feel free to take a look at that. But in that document, what did it? I'm sorry if I'm stealing your thunder, Brennan. It prioritized the 2 pools, which are just about 100 years old each, and just in terms of the regular maintenance that they require, and some urgent issues regarding safety and other hazards. So in light of that conversation last night, the board prioritized getting these pools figured out. So the rec department already had the request in. Jim shuffled a few things around, is now recommending $250,000 for the pool design services. So subject to favorable action by town meeting, we're going to get to work to see how far we can get with the recommendation. So why don't I just, and if it's okay with you, I'd like to just kind of share the packet, share my screen so you can follow along where these changes are. So here's the revised, excuse me, revised packet we sent over today. So you'll notice it includes the updated capital budget summary, the 5-year improvement plan, and the meeting schedule that we referenced last night that was sent out last week. So with these items here, recreation, you'll notice that Jim's recommendation for this item here is now $250,000. And then for the water department includes the reduced request for the supplemental water source investigation and the well improvements here for the $350,000. So the 5-year plan, the only thing that changed to the 5-year plan was updating this column here, particularly in the water department, just to move that up. So the water department's usually at the end here. So you'll notice we just moved that. This was, I think it was in year, this column here. So we just moved that to this current year. And then finally, it's just the schedule to reflect what we had sent. So just that final meeting will be here Wednesday at Town Hall. And then the next night we're meeting with the Finance Committee. So in another email I sent to Ed earlier today, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take the departments out of order tonight, just based on what's being recommended and the folks that we have on the call. So I'd like to start. I don't see.
Actually,
Oh, go ahead.
before we get started, I had a question.
Yep.
I know there's been talk about COVID relief and funds coming to the town. Does the capital budget get involved with the approval or review of any of those funds?
No, so Cheryl, I think you're talking about the ARPA funds. So,
Yeah.
Kind of in tandem with the capital budget process, that ARPA process is also taking place. So the way that it's considered like a grant. So
Yeah.
the select board has unilateral authority to authorize those expenditures, and we submit to the state, we submit to the county. They're the ones that reviews those requests and authorizes the grant funding. But as far as the capital budget and the capital budget committee's role, what this track is making recommendations to town meeting for appropriation, which is different from that ARPA grant funding.
Okay, no, I just didn't know if we are supposed to review it, because some stuff that is on our plan might be taken off due to that funding source. So I didn't know, how that played out.
No, so the way that Jim's been making his recommendations, he's making those recommendations kind of in tandem. And I think generally, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, they're considering the ARPA funding kind of like one time, great opportunity, they're not necessarily looking at equipment that we may see in the capital budget every year, but things that can be really impactful. That these are funds that you don't cities and towns don't receive it on an everyday basis. So,
right.
I think that's kind of the lens that the select board is considering those requests. So a lot of those items that are can make great strides in terms of investing in infrastructure will find their way on ARPA, compared to a lot of the items that are like equipment will remain on the capital budget.
Thanks for explaining that. Appreciate it.
No problem. And actually, the board of selectmen, the select board and the finance committee and a few other folks have there's been a series of meetings that have taken place over the summer. So they're all on YouTube. Walpole Media has covered them all. If you're interested in those conversations, feel free to follow along on Walpole Media and see what kind of conversation and deliberations taking place already.
Thank you.
Yep. So I was going to start with the Board of Assessors for tonight, but I don't see them on quite yet. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, the order I'd like to kind of go through for tonight would be Community and Economic Development with Pat DeShanes, Conservation Commission with Landis Hershey. She's a conservation agent. I don't know if anybody from the Conservation Commission is joining her. Culture and Recreation, we have Recreation Director Brendan Croak, as well as requests from the Recreation Committee and the 300th Anniversary Committee, and then Gary Riggett from the Trails Committee. It's okay with you, Ed? Unless there's any other questions, I'll turn it over. We can turn it over to Pat DeShanes from Community and Economic Development. You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Cool. Thanks, Pat. So as you can see from the recommendation from town administrator, the project, it's something that has been looked at in a few different downtown and economic development studies. It's also a project I'm approaching through a few different avenues. It's a downtown wayfinding and branding initiative. The asking price certainly looks excessive, and that kind of represents a price given to us by a consultant that is kind of like the bells and whistles, every sort of element that would go into its working with a consultant, to fabrication, to installment. So that's where that $200,000 figure comes from. As I mentioned, I'm also looking at the project through a few different avenues. One was a state one-stop for development grant application. So that's a process where you can apply for a project in the spring, and you usually find out whether or not you're awarded that project by the fall. So that's something that I'm hoping that I can receive funding through that project through that means as well. And obviously, if in the recommendations from the town administrator, it does not recommend funding at this time. I'm actually okay with that. I think this is a project that I can try to piecemeal and do through a few different avenues. I know being the proponent of the project, you usually don't say someone's saying, hey, I'm okay not getting funding, but that's kind of the reason why I brought it forward. I think I'm just trying to tackle it through a few different avenues, and if I can approach it through grant funding, I would definitely search that option as well. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments.
So Patrick, wayfinding is signs,
Yep.
Road signs, trail signs, bike signs.
So-
I'm just curious.
Yeah, for a downtown wayfinding program, the state has it's a program called the Mass Development Initiative, and part of it is working with a consultant who kind of develops a branding scheme, kind of looking at town characteristics and history, and then wayfinding itself is trying to create a sense of place and orientation within a certain area. So for this, it would be more or less trying to create an image and color scheme and something like that kind of orients visitors and people that are within the downtown, both whether it's parking signs or as directional signs to certain landmarks or features. It's kind of it's a very planner-esque exercise, and it's something that why I brought it forward. I brought it forward both through the Arpa funding as well as capital, and like I said, I've also applied for a grant to hopefully see if we can get some of that funding through a grant source. It's because this project's been brought up a few different times on downtown studies, both in 2015, 2019, and then recently with the Rapid Recovery Program in 2021. So it was a project that consultants have looked at in the past that have worked through the town as a possibility. And so that's why I guess brought that forward, is maybe that's an option, if I can pursue it, whether through capital or through ARPA or even through grant funding. I think it's something that it's definitely a nice to have project, and I think it can definitely help kind of create a sense of place within the downtown.
So Pat, is this like you develop a logo for the branding or sayings or something?
Yeah, I mean, you may see something similar to that in more kind of I don't want to say touristy locations, but some locations that have like a downtown that really has a unified signage and branding scheme. It's usually helps to kind of whether if you're a pedestrian or you're visiting town for a certain event, or you have just that sense of place within when you get into the downtown. So yeah, it is kind of based upon like a logo and a branding scheme. And so a lot of that funding revolves around working with a consultant. And so one of the grants that I did apply for, it's primarily that branding and consultant activity, not so much the actual fabrication. So.
I'm curious, have you seen other neighboring towns that have gone through such a process and what the results were?
I looked at, so the program initially is called like the Mass Downtown Initiative, and they have a few different options. I think Greenfield out in Western Mass, I think Foxborough had worked through it. I'm not sure if they actually implemented it. So there's been a few local communities that have applied for a similar grant program and have gone through that exercise of developing branding and wayfinding. And I think honestly, I just think it looks nice, and it's something that's been brought forward on a few different studies. So I'm seeing if I can try to explore making that a possibility through a few different options.
Thank you.
Pat, actually, if I can just jump in for a second, you just brought up something I was just about to mention was, it has been brought up on a few different studies. So this isn't, just coming out of thin air. Back in 2018, we did a downtown study. There's a parking and economic development study that recommended the wayfinding and branding program, as well as it was, featured in the rapid recovery study that was done. And, I know that Pat's been intimately involved with the master plan process too, where I'm sure that this has probably come up. So,
yeah, I mean, I know the downtown's definitely been looked at, as Pat mentioned, through a few different studies, and even in the master plan process, it's been something we've noticed kind of come up in terms of an area of interest, an area for where people want to see revitalized and economic development and growth in that area. So it's kind of tying into that as well, kind of trying to help improve that location.
So we'll just kind of sum it up unless there's any other questions. So again, the request was for $200,000 all in. And at this time, the town administrator is not recommending funding for this item.
Great. Next on the list, you have something else there, Patrick?
No, I'm all right with that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, if there's no other questions for Patrick, we can move on to conservation. In the meantime, I actually just got a text message from Dennis Fliss, the Director of Assessing. Didn't realize that they had withdrawn they had a vehicle that they were requesting. I understand the chairperson had a conversation with the town administrator today. So I think a few things might have just got lost in the shuffle. So they withdrew their request for the $32,000 for a Ford Escape for the Director of Assessing. So they will not be on tonight after all. So sorry for the confusion, folks.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So if you want, Mr. Chairman, next up we have Conservation Agent Landis Hershey and the chair.
So does that mean we have $32,000 to spend?
No, because he wasn't recommending. Wasn't recommending it.
Good try.
I like where your head's at, though, Cheryl. And also Jack Wiley, the chairperson of the Conservation Commission. So if you want, I can pull up my screen and I'll turn it over to them.
What happened?
Good evening. So I think there's two items, one being North Street and Memorial Pond. So you have, which one you have Memorial Pond first, looks like, or you want, let's do North Street first.
Yeah, North Street was the one we had at the top of the list right there.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
So back in 2021, the Conservation Commission was approached by New England Forestry Foundation that they had a parcel on North Street. So this is where North and Fisher meet on the Willett Pond side. And the commission was offered a piece of land. Are you getting there?
Yeah, Landis, I'm sorry. I gotta.
That's okay.
I gotta pull it up in the PDF.
That's all right. So this parcel is off of North Street. It has a very narrow access to North Street, not wide enough for it to be a buildable lot, owned by New England Forestry Foundation, approximately 3 acres in size. The parcel abuts the Willett Pond land. Which is the pond, which is owned by Neponset Land Holding Association. They own the pond and they own land around the pond. At some point, the Ian Cook from Neponset River Land Association negotiated a public land easement at 2 locations around the ponds, one being at Brook Street near the beach area, and the other being adjacent to this North Street parcel. So the commission thought, gee, this sounds interesting, and as well as people from the Trails Committee were also interested, Gary and Glenn and a bunch of other people, that it would be nice to have a parcel of land owned by the town that had access to Willet Pond. So the Conservation Commission had some funds to purchase the property, and it's the town's now under the management of the Conservation Commission. In order to access the property, there's quite a slope at North Street. So the idea was to put a turnout from North Street, approximately, with slope 40 feet wide and about 32 feet in depth, which would include the turnout as well as a ramp down to the property, so that people could come probably one car at a time, turn out off of North Street and unload a kayak or some small boat with non-motorized boat, and then drive the car up to Adams Farm and park at the parking area up there at Adams Farm, and then walk down from Adams Farm to this North Street parcel. Now, this included also developing a path along the edge of North Street, along the Adams Farm land, as well as the New England forestry land. That was the intent. That was the intent all along when the commission purchased the property. So this capital budget item is $32,436 for the tree cutting. There's an itemized sheet also in the package. The 32 is for tree clearing, stripping topsoil, excavator, common fill, processed gravel, compactor, loam, borrow, hydro seeding, erosion control, and a police detail. As everyone knows, this is a pretty busy street. These figures were put together by Chris Johnson through the engineering department with the intent that the town would do the work. The second item is $1,000 for the trail. So we would need to do some limited cutting from the trail from North Street down to where we would go to the edge of the pond. The third item would be for a boardwalk. So when you get to the edge of the property currently owned by the town, there is a little stream. And so we would have to cross the stream, and we would have to construct a small little boardwalk. And that price of $3,500 was based on similar boardwalks that have been constructed at Adams Farm. Then the fourth item is for signage. So according to the public access easement, we do have to have signage just explaining that once people step from the town land to the Neponset Land Holdings land and onto the public access easement, that they have to, there's certain rules abiding that they have to abide to. So we have to have that sign. We would also just want to mark the boundary of the town land, since there are residents adjacent, as well as a sign right at the trail. We would want a sign there as well. And then the fifth item is, because this is the work that we're doing is adjacent to the stream and adjacent to wetlands in the pond, we would have to file a permit with the Conservation Commission, and intent permit. This cost was an estimate that was given to me by an engineer that does this routinely. So that kind of gives you an idea of the project and where we came up with the costs.
So if you wanted, I can just kind of jump in for a second. So the total request for, unless Landis or you, Mr. Jack Wiley, have anything else to add, just mentioned that the total request for that item there was $42,436, and at this time, the town administrator is recommending $20,000 from free cash.
I have a couple questions. By providing access to the pond, does it open the town up for liability should there be an unfortunate accident on the water?
I can just kind of jump into that. So from the beginning, we've kept our insurance carrier in the loop on, what kind of access we're looking to provide. And it's, from their perspective, it's no different from other recreation and conservation locations around town, whether they're going through the town forest or some of the trails. It's comparable to all those other recreational conservation areas. So there's a blanket, there's a blanket amount, so it falls within that blanket.
So with the turnout, I guess at some point in the future, maybe we'll have a dock so that people can easily launch like kayaks or canoes or things.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. So that's also the intent too. We would work with the Ponce Land Holding and the Friends of Willett Pond on that. There are several property owners that do have docks, so it certainly is allowed. We have been very fortunate under sad circumstances that the family of Carol Lane and Gerald Lane, who really appreciated the pond, has set up a fund for Willett Pond access. So at some point, our intent is to use those funds to build a dock or purchase a dock.
Okay. And one more question, Patrick or Landis, is there a map? I have an idea of where this location is, but I'm not certain exactly. And if you don't, that's totally fine.
I might have one on the fly here, Gary, but it's the access. It's essentially, Landis, correct me if I'm wrong. If you're at 999 North Street, coming down, the road at Adams Farm, it's essentially right across the street from there.
Okay. All right. I can kind of picture it then. That's fine.
So
It's 2 houses down from the Fisher Street, North Street intersection, I think.
Yeah.
That's what I gathered from the map there.
right, so I did submit a map, but if you know where Palmer is, Palmer Lane, it's the
Let's try that
small
house.
cul-de-sac that just recently very large houses were built on Fisher Street.
So actually,
Okay,
I just
thank
pulled
you.
it up here. Yep.
Yeah, so you can see where North Street comes in. Right there, on the left.
Oh,
in
okay.
Fisher. And then there's a house right in front of our parcel, and the narrow area, kind of where the triangle is located. There is a fire hydrant, and that's where we want to turn out.
Okay.
Adams Farm is further north.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Landis, I have a question. My first thing was how dangerous it was to walk from Adams Farm
Yeah.
over to this access. And now you said you're gonna have a walkway, which would be nice, but would the walkway be inside the Warren property, or is it gonna be right along the roadway?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
gonna let Jack describe that because he knows the Adams Farm side better than I do. So.
To answer your question, yes, on the west side,
I can't hear him.
And you guys have an awful connection with your microphone. It's breaking up and we can't hear you at all, Jack.
Okay, from the path would be on the west side of North Street. North Street is a 50-foot right-of-way with most of the non-street portion of that on the west side. So there's room all along North Street. So it would be from Adams Farm, where the fence as the entrance road to Adams Farm, where the Friends of Adams Farm presently is in the process of putting a 4-foot gate there, so that would allow access at that end of the field, right near North Street, to from whoever wherever you park at Adams Farm, you could then access and go along the fence line, existing fence line. There's the town has a pump station on the other side of the wall. So that's, and there's also an opening in that fence line to go through and still go along North Street, not on the street, but you'd be inside on the field, which is presently, that field is hayed, and then you get down to the point where you would cross North Street. So you would not be on North Street.
That's a tough intersection over there.
It is.
Yes, there would have to be some means of providing a pedestrian crossing at that point where you have to cross North Street.
Do we know why the town administrator just offered up 20,000? Like, what does that get us in terms of the original 42,000 asking?
Yeah, so I'll just jump in here, Justin, through you, Mr. Chairman. So this was part of one of those items with the balancing act we're going through. The town administrator was going through it based on the available funding with free cash. And at the time, it was, a lot of this work we would probably be doing in-house. So it was his understanding that we may be able to use some internal resources with the Department of Public Works, or maybe, and I haven't talked to Landis about this, but I know the Conservation Commission also has some funding that may be available for other projects. So, and Landis has done a great job, as always, applying for grants. So this is one of the items that we identified that, possibly could be offset by other funding sources that we have aside from free cash. So.
Thank you.
That's what I was hoping for. Some of this stuff could be done in-house, and also I was wondering if maybe we could get some of the gravel donated, if somebody asks the right people. But and the other thing that gets me is the police details is really a killer here. That's $6,000 for that. So how much do you think you'd actually be able to get done for the 20,000?
I don't know if you're asking us or if you're asking them, but I think that's something.
I'm asking conservation.
Sorry, Landis, we can't hear you again.
There you go.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
No.
We would have to figure out.
Landis, why don't you try shutting off your camera? Maybe it's the video feed is taking a lot of the bandwidth here.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Much better.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. You don't need to see me. We'll I guess we'll figure that out. I think that maybe if we can get some material
Spoke
donated,
too
that's a
soon.
good idea. When I got the figures from engineering, I thought they're based on the town, using the towns, and it was mostly materials. So I guess if it turns out that we can't get any additional funds or supplies donated, that we would have to pare down the project to maybe not a turnout for a car, but just access for pedestrians.
Everybody get that?
So,
Yes.
Dave said yes.
Lucky
But
Dave.
I mean, I can just jump in. I think the gist of what Landis mentioned was, I think she started off by saying that's something that they'll try to figure out, that there may be items within the scope that could be
Tear down.
pared down. Yep, or maybe we can get a little bit creative about how we go about funding this internally. But Landis, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is that kind of the gist of where you were going?
I would say, yeah. It'd be great to have more money, then we wouldn't have to figure out how to do projects with, but if $20,000 And we can, that's the thing with grants, honestly, I do look at a few grants and they're mostly reimbursable, so they want you to have funding ahead of time, but I know we've done grants like that before, so I think that tends to be a possibility. So we'll make it work. Jack?
So you'll take the 20,000.
That's what I'm definitely saying.
Yes. We can,
Good answer.
we could get,
All right, unless there's any other questions, recognizing that we may be losing the folks in conservation, if it's okay with you guys, why don't we move on to the Memorial Pond treatments, and if there's any other follow-up questions to Landis, maybe we can submit responses back in writing. So
Sounds good.
Landis, I'm going to turn it back to you. I'm going to bring up the Memorial Pond treatments on the screen again.
Okay. So can you hear me? Okay. I apologize.
Yes.
I guess,
Right now,
the
yes.
laptop-
You're good. You're good.
Okay, all right. So this is a request for funds for Memorial Pond nuisance vegetation treatment. Currently, we treat Clark's Pond and we treat Turner's Pond, and we have for years, and we have funds to do that for a few more years. So that's why we didn't submit for that. As you know, Memorial Pond was dredged a few years ago, and the area that was dredged where there's deep water looks great. There's water in it. It's clear water, and it's very healthy. There are areas towards the back of Memorial Pond and to the side where invasives are starting to creep in. I had Water and Wetlands go and do a report analysis. They're the company that treats the other pond, and they provided the quote that's included in the application for $8,700.
I don't know if we lost Landis.
No, I'm still here. So the reports, so the purpose of treating the pond would be to hold back the invasives that start to creep into the pond when you don't treat. Unfortunately, they're there, they come off the streams, they come because there's shallow water that warms up. They come because we're still dumping fertilizers into our ponds from the lawn areas adjacent, and other nitrogen and phosphorus from the road, which helps support the growth of these nuisance vegetation. So this is to maintain the pond in a condition like it currently is.
So-
Any other
so
questions?
Yeah, Landis,
Yes.
is this just a 1-year treatment, or is it like a 3-year? Because most of the times in the past, we funded something for 3 years.
Correct.
Good question. So this one, this is for 1 year. And it was sort of gathered quickly. It was the same quote that I put in last year that wasn't funded. So we did it for multiple years.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I'll just jump in real quick and just say that the request was for $8,750, and that's what the town administrator is recommending from free cash.
We all set?
All right. Thanks, Landis.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chairman
Great.
Wiley. Next, I think we're going to turn it over to
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Landis. All right, so if it's okay with you, Ed, we'll turn it over to the Culture and Recreation. We'll turn it over to Brendan Croak, Recreation Director, and I know he's joined by Joe Grant from the Recreation Committee and Bill Buckley from the 300th Anniversary Committee.
Okay, so good evening. My name is Brendan Croak. I'm the Recreation Director. There's a couple different items here between the Recreation Department and also a request from the 300th Anniversary Committee. I'm not sure, it might make sense to have the 300th committee go first, if that's okay with everybody.
Yep, that'd be fine.
Okay, so I'll give a little lead in, and then I know Bill Buckley is the chair of the 300th committee. He can kind of chime in with some additional information. The 300th committee put in a request for initially put in a request for $50,000. This is an annual request that will be submitted through the completion of the 300th anniversary in 2024. So basically this funding would go towards expenses for different events and activities, and any supplies that are needed, deposits for venues, so various things like that. Bill, I think you may have some additional information that you might want to include.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, I apologize for zooming in from a sketchy parking lot in Quincy. My day job had me perambulating the boundaries of Norfolk County today. But to kind of to Brendan's point, we've been now charged by the Board of Selectmen for a year and a half to plan Walpole's 300th anniversary. And one of the largest things we have found in our fact gathering and cribbing off of our neighbors in Sharon and Norwood is just the tremendous cost of all of these programs that people would like to see. We did do a pretty aggressive survey within the community to get their sense of the things that they would like to see the committee put forward. And we've been working very closely with Jim and Patrick, and Brennan has been sort of our staff liaison for this throughout the process. But just to give you an example, to do something similar to a parade similar to what Norwood does for the 4th of July costs close to $50,000. So with that in mind, I think when I came before you last year, I sort of said two things. One, I think we're grateful for the support the town has given us. And two, we also want to be really cognizant of the fact that Walpole's full of really generous people and organizations, and many of these organizations are hit up over and over again for other community needs. So in as much as we can perhaps sidestep going to the same well over and over, going to the Friends of St. Patrick, St. Nick, going to other community groups, the downtown groups as well, recognizing that we are all competing for these funds, and that this year of celebrations, we hope to do a very large parade. We hope to beef up the 4th of July fireworks. We hope to perhaps do a light show at the beginning of the year and a ball drop to start it off, as well as other events throughout the year. That these are once in a generation events, and that they are not recurring. And we hope to, with your help, have enough funds to carry them out in a safe and really meaningful way for the community.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
So if you want to just kind of pause here for a sec. So the initial request was for $50,000 from the 300th Anniversary Committee. Since then, we've had a conversation with Brendan and Lauren at the Rec Department, as well as our chairperson, Bill Buckley, and vice chairperson, Katie Turco-Beatty. And kind of topically, the town of Norwood had their 150th anniversary kind of in between. And we really got a sense of what the numbers of a year of events kind of like the 300th Anniversary Committee might cost the town. So I think it was our intention all along to do the $50,000 last year. You may remember that was requested last year and appropriated last year, and then $50,000 this year. In light of some of these large expenses and the need to have some cash flow in terms of some of the events that the 300th anniversary is considering and the deposits that may be needed, Jim's recommending $150,000 for this year, which I know, may seems like a lot in comparison to what the request was for. But again, this is after, we had some conversations with our counterparts next door and the cost of some of these events like a gala or, parades, fireworks, things of that nature. So Bill and Brendan, anything I missed there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the newest member, Mr. Thornton, we can't, I know he will appreciate, we cannot possibly be outdone by Norwood, so.
Well, hold on one second.
I couldn't help myself.
Hey, they're
I
only
just-
half as old as us, so, you know,
That's correct.
and half as important, right?
Exactly.
Since I've been called out, I do want to tell you that, full disclosure, yes, I am from Norwood. But as my wife points out to me, I've lived in Walpole longer than I've lived in Norwood.
Still doesn't count, but okay.
But I am a carpetbagger to Walpole. So I can tell you this, my brother was on the 150th committee and he spent a ton of hours doing this. I get the need for, okay, instead of coming back every year for the same line item, do it all in one swoop and pass it out over 3 years. It's smart. The other thing that Norwood did, I'm sure Walpole's going to do the same thing. They had a lot of events like this. I went down Sunday and bought this little commemorative coin, and there was a line 2 blocks around the Norwood Theater waiting to pick these up. They were $10 a piece, but they generated some revenue. As long as you don't go crazy with the events that you had. I don't know whether you're looking to hire the Boston Pops like they did, but that was a big nut. That was $250,000 just in that one event. Okay, this seems to be pretty reasonable. I yield the floor.
I think, David, most of that 250 was donated also, right?
A lot
Yeah,
of it, yeah, half of it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's similar. We do have plans to do some merchandising, and we do hope that every Walpole kid this Christmas is going to get a 300th anniversary T-shirt, if all goes well. As well as there are people looking for tchotchkes and people who have produced their tchotchkes from 50 and 25 years ago and looking for similar things. I think all of that has a place, but I think, you know, I just want to really single out Brendan and Patrick, who are on this call, as well as Jim, for like having the dialogues with our neighbors. And we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're stealing good ideas from other people, and it is literally staggeringly expensive to do a parade which was one of the highest things we surveyed people were looking for. It is again about $50,000 to get, you know, the Colonial Boys and other organizations to come in. These are expensive, and I think we're very grateful for the staff support. Like we just had a wonderful meeting with the Officer White and Chief Bailey about possible routes and things like that. And I think all that stuff is coming into play, but a lot of these things you have to book so far in advance that this money is really crucial as seed money. And as far as I know, we did mention the gala. It is our hope that the gala will be revenue neutral once all is said and done and tickets are sold for it. But again, it's like planning a wedding, and you have to put deposits down and things of that nature sort of now for 2024.
So, Bill, do you have like a target amount that you're looking for total, or are you just gonna, whatever you get, you'll make do?
I think the answer is a little bit of both, but it's really going to depend on what types of, you know, funds we were able to cobble together. Like I said, the additional fireworks or a laser show as part of a sort of first night event could range in the $40,000 to $50,000 range, and we're looking at viability of souping up the 3rd of July fireworks as well. And again, that's a very long lead time on that, but a lot of it is going to depend on that, as well as, you know, we have been beginning our discussions with corporate sponsorships. One of the things we were looking at was, for example, revitalizing the historical trolley tours that we did a few years back. And that is something that we could perhaps sit down with a local bank and say, hey, would you like it to be the X cooperatives local trolley tours? And I think those conversations are going to happen as well. So it really, we have sort of a few key events, but the additional funding will allow us to perhaps expand that. We're also looking at a country fair with kind of animals and carousel and things of that nature as sort of a marquee event, which is also not cheap, unfortunately.
And if I could just kind of jump onto that too. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bill.
No, it's going to be like really fun. And this is, I know we're kind of in the nuts and bolts. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we are charged with having a 300th anniversary birthday party for the town. So all of this is fun. It doesn't sound fun sometimes when we're in the meetings and talking nuts and bolts, but I think that's our main charge, is to make sure that we create meaningful community experiences and events for all ages and things of that nature across the spectrum of town. So it's gonna be great.
And if I could just kind of jump in for a sec. So my counterpart in the town of Norwood, Mike Rosen, he was very gracious as far as sending over all of his budgets and financial documents. So I think, what's great about that is we've got a pretty good roadmap as far as, what we think we may be able to reasonably expend for certain, categories of events or expenditures. And also, I know they've got the auto mile and a lot of great dealerships along Route 1. So that aside, I think we've got a pretty good idea and pretty good target of where we might be able to put some goals as far as fundraising also. So
Good.
sorry, go ahead, Ed.
No, I was just gonna say, thank you to Bill for calling out David. See how it feels. I get it every day.
I got a long memory. Don't worry about it.
All right, if there's no other questions for Bill, I can turn it over to Brendan to just run through the recreation requests. I'll just pull that up.
Sure. So we'll the remaining three, two of them are kind of connected, so we'll go to the unique one first. So we requested $10,000 for downtown recreation elements and activities. So we were recently approached by a few members of the community and other various boards who were looking for exactly this: recreation elements and activities that can be permanently installed outdoors. And it sounds somewhat vague, and it is somewhat open-ended, but Patrick, if you don't mind, if I could share my screen for a second here, it might be better to kind of get an idea here. Basically what we're looking at is I kind of liken it to concrete lawn games to kind of simplify everything. So let's see here. So this is just an example of one of the companies that does provide a service like this. So if everyone can see my screen here, different companies do similar things, but basically, you're looking at concrete cornhole boards, really strategically placed throughout town. And those locations would be remain to be seen, but we're looking at game tables that could also double as picnic tables throughout maybe the town center, town common, maybe on the side of town hall, really centrally located in the center of town. Realistically, the sky's the limit. This is just kind of an example of the types of things that can be done. But it's basically to get people outdoors, families, different generations of individuals in the community. We had some large investments in the new playground over at the pool, and a lot of kid-centric elements, but not a lot of family things. And there's a lot of new residential buildings going in downtown that, there's a lot more foot traffic. And, I think that the whole idea is to, really bring people to the center of Walpole, could benefit the restaurants in town, and just kind of get people out and about. So we figured that $10,000 was a good starting amount. We've kind of reached out to various companies that offer these types of elements. It looks like depending on what type of unit that you're looking to purchase, it's anywhere between about $1,500 to $2,000. So, given the different areas in town, I think that's a good starting point to go with. There's also other various local vendors that may be able to, construct those things. And, it might not be something that we need to actually purchase from a company, rather than just kind of quote unquote do it in-house with people who are part of the community and willing to give back. So that's really what that stems from. I know it sounds very vague on paper, and it's, what does this all mean? But it's concrete lawn games and other things to just get kind of, people outside in downtown. So if anyone has any other questions, I can elaborate, or we can just, continue to move on?
Actually, I wouldn't mind getting a copy of some of that stuff for when I do the presentation to the FinCom, because we didn't get any backup material, and I was wondering what was included in that. So,
Absolutely.
do you think somehow you could forward some of those pictures to me?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll compile something. I'll send it over tomorrow for you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem.
Brendan, if you want to send it to me, I can just make sure the entire committee gets it.
Yep, absolutely. So if there's no other questions, the other two requests are somewhat connected, and Patrick had touched upon it earlier in the meeting. It's very much centered around the feasibility study, the recreation program and facility study that was recently completed by Weston and Sampson and presented last night to the select board. We have two separate items. The first one that I'll touch upon is the Blackburn Hall repairs. Initially, we requested $540,000, and I believe there was an attachment in the packet that kind of outlined where those specific numbers came from. And while Patrick's pulling that up, basically there were numerous different things that were identified as urgent or important in that study. For Blackburn Hall, Studio East, Jarvis Farm, both pools, and basically it's a large sum of money, and it's going to take a numerous amount of years to kind of chip away at everything and identify those urgent issues that need to be taken care of. So what we thought was, Blackburn Hall, as everyone's aware, it's kind of the recreation department's home base, and most of our programming, operates through this building. So we figured we would try to tackle some of those urgent and important items first. And I can just kind of go through these 5 items here. First item was listed as an urgent issue at Blackburn Hall: improve the site drainage at the base of the building. Not to go too deep into any of these items, but there are some drainage issues that are causing some structural damage to the building and other issues with the paint crumbling in the walls and just things that are making the building deteriorate. And that was at a $35,000 to $50,000 cost range. The remaining 4 items were listed as important: repair existing interior and exterior damage to the walls, foundations, and decorative trims. Improve accessibility from the exterior and through interior spaces. Renovate all bathrooms to meet current ADA accessibility codes. And finally, improve accessibility to the main entry doors from the parking lot. So the final 2 items there are ADA related. Again, the building's on the older side. If anyone's come in here for voting or any other activities or events that we've had, so you're probably familiar with the state of the building. ADA accessibility, it's definitely something that we need to bring up to code, and we finally have this roadmap and this blueprint to work off of to really hone in on the things that need to be taken care of. So those last 2 items are somewhat connected there. So that kind of encompasses the $540,000 request that we put in on the high range. Again, it included 10% design, 10% inflation, and some contingency there to give us a little bit of a cushion. So,
and if I can just kind of jump right in, so the request was, I'll just to touch back in the downtown recreation elements for a second. So the request from the rec department was $10,000, and that's what Jim's recommending is $10,000 from free cash. For this item here, the rec department submitted a request of $540,000. And Jim is recommending $420,000 from free cash. And Brendan mentioned this. I'll just kind of touch on this again too. So the urgency level here is when we did the report, we asked Weston and Sampson to prioritize the recommendations of things that are urgent, things that may have to do with either protecting the building or protecting individuals, safety, health, things of that nature. Important things were things that had to do with code, that maybe things weren't necessarily compliant, and then there was a third category for like programming, and then an out year category. So with Blackburn Hall being, as Brendan mentioned, the hub of the recreation department, we would start with these urgent and important items first. As what's great about that report they've generated is now they've given us a long range plan to work from in terms of where are we going to make these investments and in what order. So that I'm pleased that this is kind of the first step of that process. So any questions on this one? I know Joe Grant from the rec committee is on. Joe, sorry to put the spotlight on you, but anything you want to add here too?
No, thank you, Patrick. Yeah, I mean, the report was eye-opening, and obviously Brendan is being very conservative going with the urgent items. I know one of the other urgent items that was left off of this, because it's something that capital budget has approved, I think 2021, is the roof, which is I'm sure on the docket at some point soon, but that would need to be done before all of the fixes are done, because I'm sure everyone has homes and you're familiar with water damage, and water can really create havoc on a building, let alone a building of that age. So it's tough, but I think Brendan did a great job of really prioritizing. So I commend him for that.
And Joe, if I can just jump into I know it's not presented here, but again, we looked at the entire study. I believe it was close to 150 pages, and it really detailed and outlined all of the individual things that needed to be addressed. And again, we've kind of given this long-term roadmap of where we need to go and what we need to prioritize, and a lot of these are connected. It's the first domino to drop, and I think that this is these things are the first things to address, and then we can tackle the next improvement, tackle the next. So this is certainly not something that's going to be done overnight or even in the next year. This is I think selfishly, the recreation department, it's long overdue, and we need to kind of put a little TLC back into our buildings and the infrastructure of the heart of the department. So we definitely, again, can't reiterate this enough. We have a great roadmap to follow. So this is just a little peek into some of the things that really need to be taken care of now.
Brendan, I have a question. Previously, capital budget set money aside for the fans inside the building and for heating, air conditioning to be put in. Has that had a chance to be done, or is that still on a waiting list?
No, that's a great question. So we did have the fans. I don't know the exact dates, but the fans were completed. I want to say within the last year, definitely. So those were replaced. They work great. The air conditioning is in process now. They started, I would say, the first phase of it. There's been some installations on the outside to get it ready to install the actual units. My understanding is that they are just waiting on the units themselves to come in. And obviously there's long lead times and a lot of these things, with supply chain issues. So once those come in, then it's just a matter of aligning and, coordinating with the work to be physically done. So it's close to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I could just jump in for a second too, there was a question about the roof project. I think Brendan may have mentioned it. I don't know who mentioned it, but the roof is going out to bid. Donnie's working on that project, and then also he'll be in on Tuesday. Part of his request includes masonry projects, which involves the chimneys at Blackburn Hall also. So you'll hear this request is coming from the rec department, from the recreation feasibility study. Donnie's request is coming from a building perspective, so you'll hear his request about the chimneys on Tuesday.
Great.
Thank you. Any questions?
If not, we can move on to the pools.
Sure. So I left the pools for the final piece here. As you can imagine, the pools were a large piece of that study that was just completed. Again, to give a little bit of context, if anyone has visited the town pools in at any time in the recent months, years, they're long overdue to be replaced. We are doing our best to maintain them and get them open on time and keep them running throughout the summer every year. But, you know, over the past few years, we have run into, you know, larger and larger hurdles as time goes on with trying to keep these, you know, up to par. So one of the charges that we requested from Weston and Sampson was to explore what to do with the pools. You know, where do we go from here, and what all their recommendations are. Initially, there's a large section for each pool, but ultimately they said that the best course of action would be to replace the pools, pool or pools plural. You know, obviously that's a very large undertaking financially and in scope of work that needs to be done. So the first step here was to request design services for both pools, and that's the two items here that were put in front of you tonight. Center pool design services was $640,000, and South pool design services was just shy of that at $605,000. Both numbers were collected from that study and from Weston and Sampson. So and again, Patrick, I don't know if you want to give a little bit more context into that, if I missed anything from a scope, 1,000-foot stare there.
No. So again, this like I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I mentioned that this was not part of the original recommendations. It came kind of out of the discussion on priorities last night with the select board, and what's urgent, and what I don't know if anybody's had an opportunity to read the report that I sent in the link today, or you can also watch the meeting from last night also. But the bottom line from Weston and Sampson is, listen, you can continue to put band-aids on these pools, but they're at the point where they need replacing. They're both nearing being 100 years old, so they do need replacement. We're not I hate to use the money going down the drain because they're pools, but this is something that they've identified as kind of their top priority from that. So what we've asked Brendan to do is he's put the total cost of the pool replacement on his 5-year plan, kind of in the out years. So what in today's dollars, what they're estimating bottom line for the pool across the street would be something along the lines of $7.3 million for construction, and South Pool $6.5 million. So the request for the design services, let me just pull up the request for the design services overall was $1,245,000. That wasn't new. That's been on there, and then just based on cash that we've got to have available through free cash, Jim's recommending $250,000 for that. So what we've done with some of the other projects, that I think what we're looking to do with this money here would be to kind of take it in phases. So by combining these, essentially the procurement for pool design services for both of them, there may be some savings between having to do both of them separately from each other. So there may be some savings there. And then, we could look at doing the design services in phases. So we'd have to go through schematic design development, construction documents, and then putting it out to bid, and then construction administration from a design or engineering firm. So, what we'd look to do is, when we bring in our engineer or designer on board, have a conversation about scope. Is it something where we can do both pools at the same time, design both pools at the same time? Maybe it's something where we do something a little bit different than what we're accustomed to across the street here at Town Hall. That'll all be part of the programming discussions that we'll want to have with an engineer, with Brendan, with Cheryl Kavanaugh. She's the aquatics director, presumably the recreation committee, some folks in the building here too. So we think that with the $250,000 that Jim's recommending, we can at least start the process of having those conversations with engineers, design firms and engineering firms, to figure out where are we going with, this glaring need for both of these pools, and, what's the best approach for Walpole to try to get there. So I'm happy to address any questions on that aspect. That's kind of how we're doing the middle school project now. So the initial requests at the beginning, you remember there was $1.5 million that was appropriated for the feasibility study. And with that money we got through schematic design, at the end of schematic design, that's when the project went to the voters for the rest of the project for the Bird Middle School. So when, after the election day last year, that enabled funding for the rest of design, including design development, construction docs, construction administration, as part of that. So it's not unlike what we've done in the past. We think that, with this $250,000, we can at least get a sense of where we're going, and then, come back at a future level, future date, a future town meeting, and request funding once we've got a better idea.
Patrick, you're throwing out numbers of construction that would total over $13 million. Considering that high number, is there any consideration for, instead of two pools, have one pool that's enclosed?
So I'll be honest and say that the conversation has come up, and that's something I think we're going to have a conversation about. The problem is, and I've said this, as a former recreation director, and I've talked to Brendan and Jim and Joe Grant and a few other folks too. What the two pools enables is, so right now, I don't know if any of you have kids that have gone through the swimming lessons, and Brendan, jump in if anything I'm saying is mistaken. They do the swim team in the morning and the swimming lessons, and then adult swim 12 to 1. By the time, the center pool across the street becomes available, it's around 1 o'clock. Meanwhile, we have the south pool that might be more available, or, Brendan, maybe I'm confusing the locations of these, but it enables some flexibility having the two pools, or, maybe it's something where we have a conversation about having one big pool, that can enable all this stuff. So I think those are things we're gonna have to consider. I think it's something that we're gonna have to put our heads together, because, I think we're looking at that overall number bottom line saying, holy cow, like you gotta figure out ways to get creative here. Brendan, anything you want to add there?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think, really what it comes down to is, maximizing the efficient use of the pool, and how many, how to get as many hours out of the pools as we can get. And, again, at times we you look at the size of Walpole and say, oh, you don't need two pools. But again, without that second pool, we're really not even starting public swim until 1 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock. And with the very hot summer, actually this year, we reached capacity a few times, and to be able to have that overflow location when people needed to get some relief from the heat was eye-opening, to say the least, because we never saw it in that regard. But again, I think from my standpoint, everything's on the table. Everything should be considered. If we're going to do this, I want to do it right. I want to make sure that it makes sense for the town, and not just, okay, we're going to build two pools because that's what we always have.
Right.
If that's not the solution, then that's not the solution. I know other areas, maybe a little bit closer to the city, have explored potential splash pads in the true sense of no water. Water comes up through the ground, and it's otherwise a rubber surface or a concrete surface. And I would expect that should be something that could be explored as well. And then you have different types of aquatic areas for the people in town. So it's definitely, at least with center pool now, and the splash pad being constructed, I think 7 years ago now, the new playground, it's definitely a hub for the town and for a lot of the young families that moved in. And, we're seeing a lot of people from out of town come in to use our facilities because they're so great, and they're being, attended to appropriately. And, we certainly want to add the pools into the mix as well. Again, I think Patrick nailed it. It's that number, the sticker shock. It's, we've been putting, I was joking a little bit with Joe last night. I said, we've been putting Band-Aids on these for so long, we need a tourniquet at this point, because we've run out of Band-Aids. And, it's starting to become tricky to manage, chemical expenses and water expenses, because we're constantly chasing ourselves here. So it's certainly long overdue, but it's definitely going to be a challenge to kind of put the numbers together when the time comes.
I have a quick question, and I apologize if this is ignorant. If the pools exist and have a current footprint, what has to be designed?
Well, there's a lot of elements related to like drainage. If you look at the buildings themselves, the shell may be able to exist, but the interiors will need to also be redesigned. So a lot of it's not code compliant. 100 years ago, things have changed as far as ADA accessibility in the past 100 years. So
okay,
there's a lot there, in terms of, civil work that'll need to be done. parking. So there would be a lot kind of involved, but our next step, subject to appropriation, is we would draft an RFQ seeking for design services for qualified firms. We put it out there, receive the qualifications from respective design firms, and in that RFQ, what we would do is we would essentially describe what our project goals are here. So if it's like Brendan kind of mentioned, everything's kind of on the table. We throw out a couple different scenarios. A couple different scenarios in terms of maybe one consolidated pool, two pools at different locations, expanding the footprint, changing the footprint. Like that section next to Morgan Field, like kind of behind it. Maybe we can move into that area a little bit there. So it's a really big parcel. It's not just what you see across the street of Town Hall here. That whole parcel kind of wraps around and goes out to Diamond Street and out to East Street also. So, I think when Weston and Sampson put these numbers together about what their recommendation for design services could cost, I think that they were just kind of, they threw a bunch of different ideas to us, and I think they were kind of giving us, if you approach this one pool, this is what you're looking at. If you approach this other pool, this is what you're looking at. I think they were kind of going all in with some of their recommendations, not knowing what the town's next steps are going to be without input from the recreation committee and the recreation director, town administration, the select board. So there's a few different options that we can consider. We'll want to bring that design firm to the table to kind of shore that up. But I hear what you're saying, Leah. It's a lot of money, and hopefully when we get those qualifications back, the price tag for these design services won't be quite so much.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. I appreciate the backdrop there. I was just literally thinking of it as, well, are we going from an oval to a square? Like what?
Right.
But obviously there's way more infrastructure aligned to this. So thanks for the overhead.
Yeah, I'd recommend take a look at the report. It's pretty extensive. It's really detailed. They brought out all disciplines of Weston and Sampson with their utility folks, their civil folks, electricity, all trades. They really put a pretty thorough report together. So you may remember 2008 Weston and Sampson, they did a fields master plan for the town. That was kind of the basis behind our approach towards investing in the athletic fields in town from 2008 till, if you drive up to the field complex now, you'll see that there's some things that we're still doing up there. So, it's hopeful that this next phase of recreation, we'll be using this report for quite some time.
I watched the presentation last night of that was given, and they did an outstanding job. But what I took away from it, in addition to how old all of the pools were, is the water leakage. It was like 90,000 gallons at one pool and 60,000 gallons, correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick, approximately at the other pool. And that's a huge loss of water to our town wells and such. So the process of having this and making sure that and it will be addressed, that how to prevent going forward to have this problem is a plus factor for the town wells.
Agreed, Josette. And what I'd like to do, I'd like to kind of take a look at some of those numbers. I know the rec department's just kind of finishing up their season for the summer. Some of those bills and those meter readings haven't quite been crunched yet. But there are, in addition to water you may lose from drainage, you lose water from evaporation. It's been a pretty hot summer. I think it all points towards, why keep wasting maintenance money when we don't need to. So
I agree with Leah there with the numbers. They're kind of overwhelming, and you think that a design for pool would be on the shelf and you could just pull it off and dig a hole. I mean, to me, $640,000 would be what I would think you would spend for the pool, to install it. Never mind, because I was looking at these numbers for the design, and usually the design is 10% of the cost, and that's actually what it comes out to when I'm saying $6.5 million for the pool. So
Yeah, and I'd like to just point out, so you used exactly kind of that rule of thumb that I think that Weston and Sampson used. So when they gave us those those estimates for design, I think they were going kind of all in on what they recommended at first, and that 10% kind of number that they use, we kind of use as a guideline for what when budgeting for design costs. So again, I hope when we put out an RFQ, we'll see some contracts that will be a lot less than what they're recommending here.
Hope so.
And if you know a contractor that can do pools for 600,000, feel free to pass them our name. I'll take that.
That's insured.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for Brendan before we move on? So again, just to kind of come back to it. So Brendan's request was 1,245,000. Jim's recommending 250,000 from free cash. And if not, Brendan, Joe, Bill, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then last, we have, sorry, Gary, you kind of came in last. Gary's the Trails Committee is responsible for the request from the Trails Committee for you this evening. So Gary, I don't think you need much of an introduction. This is Gary Riggett from the Trails Committee.
Hey, folks.
Good evening.
And then Gary, I just pulled up on the screen here the document that you sent me that kind of backs up the $20,000 request.
Sure. There's really three big items on here. So one on this first page, $10,000 is an estimate for a feasibility study. So you folks may or may not have heard about the Metacomet Greenway Trail. And what that is it's largely a group based in Norfolk, but includes Walpole, Norfolk, Wrentham. I think they go out as far as Franklin. And what they're looking to do is, we may be familiar with the Old Colony rail bed. That's actually the basis of the walking trail that's right behind the senior center. So that rail bed went as far as Bird Machine up in East Walpole. And there's a pretty good swath behind the senior center. It actually runs through the Walpole Housing Authority property, which is on Ellis Street. It runs under Common Street behind the senior center, and then it ends at Ian's Landscaping. I forget the last name, but it sort of follows the road that goes up into Southridge Farm. It goes through the Cedar Swamp, and then it used to follow the path of Winter Street and continued on down Spike Yonkers driveway is actually the old rail bed, and continues on from there, approaching the Norfolk town line, and then continues on ultimately to Wrentham, through Norfolk into Wrentham and so forth. Anyways, with that as a bit of location information, a group in Norfolk is considering creating a greenway, and what they want to do is make an ADA accessible bike path. So that means it needs to comply with certain requirements on the grade and the width. So the Walpole section would terminate at the playing fields complex at the Norfolk border, and there would probably be about a half mile of trail in Walpole before we hit the Norfolk border. So I'm not sure if any of you folks have ever been back there. The rail bed is actually pretty intact. I mean, using an example of what's behind the senior center, it's a lot of time and effort was put in to make it flat within a certain extent. And it's the same way once we get into Norfolk. The issue is that the playing fields are at a higher elevation, and I'm not sure how much higher. It's somewhere on the order of probably 75 feet. So it's going to be a little hard to see, but so I've walked out there in the past, and so if I use my hand to sort of replicate the slope of the land, the bike path is sort of where my wrist is. All right, we have to get up to the playing fields level, which is up about here. The terrain back there seems to have a bump in it, so the best way for us to meet the ADA requirement, the slope requirement, is to sort of go around the slope as opposed to going straight up. So choosing the best route is going to require a feasibility study. And that is what this line item number 6 is referring to. So Glenn Maffei was in touch with a consulting group about 2 years ago, and they told him, yeah, we can give you a feasibility study and it'll cost 30 grand. And Glenn's like, that's way out of our league. So since then, I've gotten in contact with a engineering group that's part of the Metacomet Association. A couple of young engineers, they're starting out, and they said, oh my God, that's our feasibility won't come in anywhere near that. So that's where the 10 grand comes from. It's to choose the best path that would allow the path to be constructed, the Greenway to be constructed. So one other piece of this is that there, I guess, a buyer for the Southwood Hospital property had been identified, and they were fully supported the Greenway project. They unfortunately backed out from the purchase, so they're waiting on the next buyer to come along. I guess my understanding is that there's been a couple over the years. So anyways, that's the biggest item in my budget is the 10 grand for a feasibility study. And a couple other items on there. And you can see from page 1, I mean, some of these things are hundreds of dollars. The feasibility is the biggest ticket at 10. And then I'm looking at $1,000 to put in a set of stairs over in East Walpole. If anyone wants to hike on the Indian Trail, which runs along the north and west side of the Neponset River, the most convenient place to park is at the Hoagie Bear Factory or Humble Pie Factory in East Walpole. And it's a bit of a challenging grade to go from the parking lot up to the trailhead. So $1,000 for stairs to make that more accessible. And then, so that's item number 9. And then going down to item number 11. So the Trails Committee has just reached the point where we've designed some trail maps, and those will be going in as part of our phase 1 mapping project, trail signage project. Those will be installed beginning this fall in the town forest and in the Pinnacle and Indian trails, town forest behind the high school, and then the other parcel over towards South Street and Jarvis Farm. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 will be some of the other trails in town. That's the Getz Trail. We call it the as yet unnamed trail. That goes between Johnson Middle School and Elm Street School. And then there's also a set of trails behind Elm Street School that's on the Turner Conservation Area. So there's we're looking for another $2,000 for signage there. So those are the biggest ticket items. Oh, and then, excuse me, so I forgot number 12. So one of the Trails Committee members has proposed and has asked for a street crossing sort of close to the DPW access road. So she's a frequent hiker of the Bay Circuit Trail, which cuts through the DPW access road, goes across Washington Street and then into the woods. And she has asked for signage like you see at some bike paths. So we're thinking solar powered. So there's less infrastructure required. And as a person approaches these crossing signs, they start to illuminate, they warn drivers that there are pedestrians in the area. So the price of $4K came from talking to Drew Hand. Drew said that the purchase price for the signs that have the solar panel, then with the blinking light, and I think there's some maybe in East Walpole by the Sunshine Country Day School. Those are $1,500 a piece. And then I threw in extra money for installation. So those are my biggest ticket items. Feasibility study is by far the biggest one. And then signage, stairs, and then this grade crossing. So that's it. And I guess to maybe politic a little bit on the Trails Committee's behalf, the last couple of years of pandemic, I've been involved in the trails since the early 2000s, and the last 2 years we've seen more people at our parked at our trailheads and out on the trails than we have at any point prior, and I think that's been a great thing. I think also it's helped that the Hometown Weekly, I think at times they're looking for things to publish, but they've been good ambassadors for us. They publish articles, they publish articles on our behalf. They talk about the trails, and I think that helps get people out into the woods and on the trails. And since my involvement in the Trails Committee, our two main focuses have been promoting the trails, which we call outreach. So historically, we've done that through Walpole Day and Jarvis Harvest and public events like that. And then the other focus is doing trail work, keeping the trails clear and marking them and so forth. So the pandemic has, I think, brought a lot of attention to the trails. People are using them more than they have. So we just want to get a little bit of money to help what we consider a sort of a draw to the quality of life for people living in Walpole. They have recreational opportunities that towns like Norwood just don't have. Norwood doesn't have any open space. So that's my spiel.
And if I could just jump in, so the request was for $20,000, and that's what Jim's recommending from free cash. If I could just jump in for a second here. So this was, I'm glad to see that the Trails Committee submitted this. I've been working with Gary and a few other members of the Trails Committee to try to identify a few funding sources for some of the projects that they've been working on, including a sign program that they did this past spring. So during the capital budget process, I kind of made a suggestion to Gary and to Barbara on the committee. It might not be a bad idea to have put in a request to the capital budget just to have something from which, as these projects come up, funding source from which to draw on, knowing that Gary and everybody else, all dedicated volunteers that are working on these trails have a very long list of some of the projects that they want to undertake, and that's not even including some of the work that Gary and other folks do in the town forest and Adams Farm and other conservation and recreation locations around town. So I'm glad to see that the Trails Committee is requesting the $20,000 for the projects that were listed, and Jim's recommending that same amount.
I have a question, but first of all, I want to thank you and the Trails Committee because I'm one of those pandemic users. So
Nice to meet you.
You mentioned earlier that the Southwood Hospital property buyer fell through. Would that impact the Metacomet bike trail that you're proposing if there's a new buyer who wouldn't support the project, or is that
So,
just?
I've been working with those folks for probably 4 years now.
Mhm.
And the first buyer was also fully supportive of this thing. So you kind of have to, I've been back there many times. Just picture the path that's behind the senior center,
Mhm.
but it's a little more overgrown, but it's flat. And I think so what they're considering for the Southwood Hospital is maybe 200 acres or more. So that's a big development. So it's ready-made. And they see that as a benefit. That means less investment on their half. Plus, it's just they're waiting to be sort of polished up a little bit. So, I mean, it's hard to say. I'm not a land developer. I'm an engineer. But it's the fact that the path is there and it's established and people use it that live in that neighborhood. I'm pretty confident that the next person that comes along and maybe does actually complete the project will support that as well.
Okay, thank you.
So
Gary,
one thing that
Sorry, can I just jump in for a second there? So, knowing that, ultimately it's going to depend on whichever developer does end up settling there. I would just mention that I know that the town of Norfolk, they've undertaken a study and a process themselves with consultants about the rail trail. And it's an official formal effort that the town of Norfolk has been making to try to make this extension here. So in light of that, again, not knowing what an eventual developer may permit on their property, there might be something that where it's a priority of the town of Norfolk on their side of the town line. There might be something that might come up during the permitting process if and when somebody does, ultimately buy the property and submit application for development there.
So one last thing I'll say, I'm sure all of us have taken 1A into Rentham Center. And as you're approaching the 1A and 140 intersection, the big white church is on, if you're heading south, the big huge church is on your left side. As you're approaching that church, you pass over an overpass that's kind of easy to overlook, but down below there, that's that rail bed. All right, so just as a point of reference, so it crosses under 1A and then continues through Rentham and then follows along 1A on the old, I think it was Thermo Gerald Ash. It was a big property that's now abandoned, but that path continues on for quite a ways, and RVers have been using it for a long time. So just it's something to keep in mind as you head towards Rentham.
Thank you.
I just want to say I have faith in supporting Gary. I worked with him down in Springbrook, and he's been dedicated with the trails for a long time, and he's done a great job with it. My wife has been up through the Sharon Country Day Camp, the bridge you have up there and stuff, and walking the trails. So I think he'll stretch out this money and get the stuff done.
We're pretty thrifty.
You've done a great job.
Thanks, Josette. Thank you.
Any other questions? Or? No. Okay, I think we're good. We're good. Patrick, anything else to add?
Yeah, if I can just share my screen for one last second here. So they're not on the call tonight. They don't have a request for this capital budget, but the Council on Aging, they did submit as part of their 5-year plan a Ford cutaway van replacement that's slated to come in 2025 for, in today's dollars, $131,507. So if you notice in the 5-year plan, and just want to point that out because it is in your packets that the Council on Aging, let me zoom in a little bit here. It is on their capital budget. So I just wanted to, if they had a request this year, they'd probably be on the meeting tonight, but I did just want to kind of mention that to you folks also. And then lastly, just a review of the schedule. So the next meeting will be where are we? Next Tuesday, August 30th at 6 p.m. on Zoom. That night we'll have the school department in. So Superintendent Goff, the leadership team, and members of the school committee will be on. And then building maintenance superintendent Don Anderson, he'll also be on. Typically, we pair them together just in case there's questions about buildings, things of that nature. So unless there's any other questions or comments for tonight, I think we're all set.
Actually, with the school committee, you'll have all the backup information.
Ahead of the meeting?
Yeah, wow. Hope we get it at the meeting.
So yeah, let me just if I could just pull up what they have here. Yeah, why don't I'll talk to the school business administrator about supplementing the material. A lot of this, particularly relative to the middle school project, and what they're seeking for the high school project has been part of public discussions with the select board and the school committee and the school building committee already. So I think what we could do is we could probably share some of those materials ahead of time before the meeting on Tuesday. And I'll see if I can get some additional material for some of the other items on the request list.
Patrick, I have a question on the scheduling. The September 1st meeting, we're meeting at 6 o'clock at the FinCom room. And we're going to be are we going over the DPW request and such?
So Josette, just pulled up the schedule. So we're meeting with school
Yeah.
department and building maintenance on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Wednesdays with the DPW. And
In
then,
person.
Yep, in person, expecting the capital budget committee will take the votes that night. And then the
Okay.
very next night on September 1st, that's when the finance committee's meeting.
Yep.
It's got a little under 24 hours to prepare his remarks.
So be patient.
Finance
Be
committee.
patient.
What's that, Ed?
I told her to be patient, have the committee be patient. There's a lot of support that night.
So that's at 7. It's a regularly scheduled finance committee meeting, Josette.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
I was just confused for a moment that it's 2 separate nights with the DPW being Wednesday night. And the vote's taken Wednesday night, and then we meet with FinCom on Thursday.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Patrick, none of the banks donate towards the Council on Aging van? Weren't they supporting that in the past?
They were. So actually this year, actually I might have my dates mixed up. I think it was toward the end of the last year's calendar year, going into this calendar year, Walpole Cooperative Bank made a pretty sizable donation to a new van at the Council on Aging, for which, I know the Council on Aging, Jim, me, members of the select board are very grateful. What that did was enable the Council on Aging, and Josette, I know you're on the Council on Aging board, feel free to jump in. It was a van smaller than some of the buses that the Council on Aging typically uses, which is great because it's easy for them to kind of buzz around town, pick people up, drop people off. Maybe it's a day where they're shopping at one of the grocery stores, or they're helping out with like doctor's appointments, things of that nature. So we're very grateful for that donation from Walpole Cooperative Bank. It's allowed carry a couple of years before we look at replacement a couple of years. But and I'm going to start keeping a tally of all these folks that you're volunteering to help us with our capital plan, whether it's with pools or vans.
Walpole Co-op has been extraordinarily generous to COA, and they did bring in this new van. And the nice part about it is that our other vans, you have to have a different, was it a Class D, Patrick? You have to have a different license for the buses as opposed to the van. The van is just a regular driver's license. And it's more economical on gas, considering what we're dealing with gas. And as Patrick said, we do a lot of medical appointments to the abutting communities. So, and it's very easy for anybody to access the van. There's no high steps as was in the buses and stuff. So it makes it, for some of the seniors, it makes it so much easier. And for the driver going into their appointments and stuff, the parking is much easier doing the van than doing a bus. So we're thrilled to have it.
Knocked it out of the park, Josette.
Yeah.
Okay. We all set? Okay. You all set, Patrick?
Oh, yeah, I'm all set. Yep. So I guess the only thing left to do is your roll call to adjourn.
Okay, I'm gonna cut out, folks. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
All right,
Have a great
All
night.
right, thank you.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move. Seconded.
Okay, that's good. All in favor, Josette,
Yes.
Noreen,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Leah,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
and me as an aye. All right, thank you all. See you Tuesday.
Thank you,
right,
everybody.
thanks, everybody.
Good night.